Tonight, we have a panel of 4 experts in Indonesian FinTech and financial inclusion. And we just came off a very inspiring talk from Hendry about his progress with Komunal. So we'd like to use that as a springboard to discuss what can be done in Indonesia in FinTech, and especially what we can take from Japan to Indonesia, as well as what kind of lessons we can draw in the Japanese market. So I'd like to just go across the stage with a self-introduction. Hendry, can you start?
Yeah, sure. So I spent most of my career in banking and finance. I started my career in Barclays Investment Banks, and then I moved to Goldman Sachs in Singapore to manage the credit risk management and advisories. And before I start Komunal, I was with Glencore oil trading department. So this is where I learned about SMEs. So we have started Komunal for 5 years by now. Yeah.
Okubo-san?
Mic check. Okay. Hi, I'm Okubo from East Ventures South Asia Fund. Just a little bit about East Ventures first. So we started investing in Indonesia since 2009. Our first investment was a company called Tokopedia that turned out to be one of actually the first investment that they took from a VC as well. Since then, we've have 10 funds for South Asia only, and we manage about 1.7 billion, 400 portfolio companies, one of which is, of course, Komunal, and 5 unicorns. And then just also to just mention that we also do have Japan fund called East Ventures Japan. That was a fund that span off after we started off in Indonesia. So the team is different, GPLPs, everything is different, but we do have 2 platforms in South Asia and Japan where we sometimes collaborate and work together with. As for myself, I started off when I took a year off from college, and I started my own first startup, which I sold to an angel investor. And I joined Sumitomo Corporation and back in 2010, and I was involved in investments for the first few years for the corporate as a group. And then ever since was in South Asia to start and help with fintech startups in Singapore and Malaysia. And I joined SoftBank Group, which is now called Line and Yahoo Corporation, as their Z Venture Capital, which is one of the largest CVC, as I understand, in Japan, and joined East Ventures in 2018 to start the growth fund. So on the growth fund side, we have about almost $1 billion in AUM with across 2 funds. And I cover fintech and SaaS within the team.
Hello, my name is Aiko Miyazaki. I'm from Financial Services Agency, Japan. I started my career in Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and I was working in Division of Africa and also the Embassy of Japan in Cuba. And I joined FSA last summer, so it's my second year. And currently, I'm working for bilateral and multilateral financial relationship mainly with Asian countries. And also, I'm working for one of the G20 initiative called Global Partnership for Financial Inclusion, which is a platform for all G20 countries and interested non-G20 countries and international organizations. And we discuss how we can improve financial inclusion in the world. So today, maybe I would like to share some of our initiatives. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Umezawa. I'm working for Global Mobility Service and then currently as a CEO, and then moved to Indonesia last 4 years ago. So I was invited by the Sumitomo Corporation and then as well invested by the Sumitomo Corporation as well. So I'd like to share my experience working in tough countries. Today, I'm glad to have the invitation from these opportunities. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you very much, all of you. And let me introduce myself. My name is Shinpei Yamashita. I work for Sumitomo Corporation. I belong to the global corporate venture capital operation within Sumitomo Corporation. We have investment bodies in Silicon Valley, London, Hong Kong, Israel, and Japan, and investing in a variety of sectors that Sumitomo is active in, which is basically all the sectors. And our Hong Kong entity, which is responsible for investment in China and Southeast Asia, invested in Komunal last year. And I am based in Tokyo, responsible for doing business development. Just a little bit more about myself. I joined Sumitomo back in 2006. I was a consultant before that. And at Sumitomo, I have been doing venture investment primarily in the clean energy sector. And until about 2013. After that, I moved to the telecom sector and worked in Mongolia and Myanmar for about 6 years. And this is actually where my brush with fintech came in, because in Myanmar, I was in the team that launched the mobile money for our mobile operator. And we had been exploring incorporating lending to this scheme. And so when I saw Komunal, I was very impressed by it and seemed to solve a lot of problems that traditional microfinance wasn't able to solve. So today I'd like to first of all, start off the discussion by asking a question to Okubo-san. Okubo-san has known East Ventures Komunal the longest. And what were your expectations when you first invested in Komunal?
Sure. So we actually, at East Ventures, we have two teams and two funds. So one is seed fund and another is growth fund. Of course, we liked Komunal so much that we invested from across all the funds, and we have a lot of investment in them. So a lot of high expectations as well. But from what I heard so I can speak on two fronts. So from the seed fund, I understand Hendry met our founding partner Wilson at a church. Yeah. So I think that was when the relationship kickstarted. But just to give you a taste of how many deal flows that we get on the seed fund side, we get more than 3,000 inbound deals every year. And as I have mentioned, we have about 400 portfolio companies across the group, most of them, of course, invested by seed. And this is across over the last 15 years. So over the last decade, we probably have had close to, or maybe 15 years, 40,000 deals that have come to us. So that's only 1% cut, or even less than that, for the seed fund to be making an investment. And so Wilson typically looks for three characters. One is integrity, second is excellence, right? And then third is paradoxical character or personality. So that must have really fit well with Wilson, and that's why from the seed fund, we usually invest in the best founders. On the growth front, why we really liked Hendry and the team is we actually had of course there's the blue ocean part where Hendry has given a presentation about being that outside of Greater Jakarta, the market is fully untapped. And there's no digital transformation that happened. So it was a really blue ocean. So we liked the theme and the problem that they were solving. But overall, even for us, when we invested in a company and now a multi-billion-dollar unicorn called Zendit, it's the Stripe of Southeast Asia. I actually invested from the growth fund in Series A. They continue to grow to a multi-billion-dollar. And I personally saw the same characters from Hendry and also the company, right? The thing is, what is that? The key thing is they continue to solve the problems of a big market, and they continue to have new products, including the banking as a service, that core banking solution that they mentioned. They didn't have that when we first spoke, right? So they continue to find the problem that is embedded within the society in that local community, and they come up with the product so fast. And it's still a blue ocean. They have huge market share, and the numbers speak to itself. Sorry, I probably overrun, but.
Okay, thank you very much. That was a very inspiring data. Let me just add a little bit of my own impression of Komunal when we invested last year. Like I said earlier, I was looking at microfinance in Myanmar, and the thing about microfinance is that they lend a few $100s to about a couple of $1,000s maybe, and that's great for the really small individual merchants. But when they grow and their business and start need more funding, what happens? The microfinance are not able to offer more funding. And so if there's no institution that's able to offer small but not very small funding, they're kind of stuck. The BPRs are targeting this kind of segment. And so it's an essential part of letting people grow into a comfortable lifestyle. And the fact that these BPRs are having trouble securing funds to do the business and you are satisfying this need seem like a perfect fit for the missing link in financial inclusion, which is why we made the investment, part of the way I wanted to make the investment last year. I don't know about the other people in Sumitomo. Okay, so moving on to a little bit, I'd like to turn my attention to Umezawa-san. So Umezawa-san is also doing promoting financial inclusion in Indonesia using another method. So Umezawa-san, can you tell us a little bit more about your business?
Okay, so GMS is a fintech IoT device companies. Our approach is to the financial inclusion is to the drivers. There are super apps called Grab and Gojek in Indonesia. And then another strong application company recently raising the market is InDrivers and Maxims. So there are drivers. We call it Mitra, individual drivers. They don't have a credit. They don't have a collateral to buy the car. That's why we install our devices to monitor the driver's behaviors, payment, and then the working histories. So we monitor this driver's data and then try to support directly to the drivers for their credit. And then hopefully that the banks see the credit histories and then the data, and then give the money, loan to the drivers. That's our approach to the financial inclusion.
So thank you very much. So that's a fascinating approach. The key missing link, I think, in financial inclusion is lack of data. And Hendry's company seems to solve the problem with face-to-face interaction, while your company solves the problem by acquiring driver data. So I'd like to just ask about what you felt about Komunal's business as you were listening to the presentation earlier. Yes.
So we started quite good score, especially started with a tricycle in the Philippines. And then the next countries, I started in Cambodia for the four wheels, and then to the Indonesia, also for the four wheels. And then hit the COVID-19. Then many people cannot pay back because the finance company loan with our devices, but the driver cannot go out. So after that, recovery situation already have a default situation. So we decided to buy up the car, and then we provide the data still, but we already have a bad history. So right now we are using equity to buy up the cars, and then accumulated already 700 assets. And then our business field is expanded to the logistics also. And then we provide a B2B. Getting the field is bigger. And then, but unfortunately still the banking and then the finance company not giving the individual. That's the situation right now.
Okay. Do you think there's the Komunal's method and your method, there's some kind of complementary potential?
I think so, because the driver is not only to the big area. The rural area also have applications. And then there are also two wheels, the motorbike, and then also four wheels necessary to move to the one way to the others. But all of them cannot get the finance. So the approach of the your company is quite good and interesting.
Okay. So Hendry, I'd like to return the attention to you. So you just heard about GMS's approach, and I'd like to hear about what you thought about their approach, how much they contribute to your customer base or the segment you haven't served.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting approach because when we look at credit, I mean, from my previous experience has been in credit risk. The way we look at how we solve credit risk, there are always two pieces of the same coins. The first one is where we analyze the ability to pay, whether this guy have the ability to pay. So that's where all the technology can make it easier and more efficient and more accurate. So whatever that GMS is doing is very good because we cannot just trust the driver for what he says, but the IoT devices will be able to give us the real and independent data. But the other side of the coins is not just ability to pay, but the willingness to pay. So this is something that people often take for granted because I believe that rational human being will actually weighing what if I'm not paying, what can happen to me, or what if I pay, so which one is better, right? So when people believe that not paying is better, then they will think of every way the creativity all come out of how not to pay, right? So the incentive has to be right as well. Yeah. So this is where I think when we say rural bank is lending to you, then they feel bad about it. We have real cases. People in Bali, we borrow from our platform, and we say that, hey, by the way, the money that lent to you is from the bank in Bali in the same cities. And people in Bali will know that you're not paying. So they straight away, okay, I'll make a payment. I'll do drip and drab until it's completed. Yeah, so I believe it's complementary in Pesa.
Okay. So that kind of ties into what you were saying during the presentation about the issues in Indonesia about how lenders are not willing to build up a credit history. That's kind of linked to the unwillingness to pay.
Correct.
Right. And that kind of change of mindset, the building of financial literacy is probably a key part of financial inclusion. And I'd like to now turn my attention to Miyazaki-san about what the interest of the Japanese government in the Indonesian financial inclusion in particular, what the Japanese government wants to do to help Indonesia with financial inclusion.
Okay, in the context of financial inclusion, now, at this moment, we don't have any concrete policy toward Indonesia, but what we are working on in GPFI is to provide some examples of Japanese fintech companies that contribute for financial inclusion. We have some examples in Japan, but currently we don't see many examples between Japan and Indonesia. So listening to your presentation, I learned a lot. How there are business cooperation between Japan and Indonesia.
So in order to think about what kind of technology would be appropriate, I think we should think about the verticals, what kind of sectors can be served. And this is because GMS is specifically serving the driver segment, which is a very important vertical. Is there any other vertical that's maybe underserved, which might have a good industry-specific solution? Can any of you think of any particular needs? For example, is there some opportunity in agriculture? Is there some opportunity in tourism? Is there any opportunity in the retail sector? Yes.
I think you mentioned about lack of data, and I want to mention about climate change. And many MSME companies have some problem for disclosure. So maybe like fintech technology can help with disclosure for SME companies.
Okay.
I can just jump in as well. So I cover fintech and do look at a lot of the verticals and business models across South Asia. What I'd like to mention is that we do see a lot of lending companies for what Yamashita-san has mentioned as part each of the verticals, including agriculture. There's a lot in especially around the supply chain financing. So that's per every industry. Where you see any B2B transactions, there's a lot of middlemen and there's a lot of mom and pops or even individual owners. So that's a space that I would say, lending companies have noticed. And it's really a matter of, is that company really focused on serving the greater Jakarta area? Or like Komunal, through working with BPRs, they serve more of the rest of the country. I think that's one. Another is really also on the retail end, so more on the consumer lending, especially something closer to credit cards. So except for Singapore, within South Asia, credit card penetration rate is very low. So in Indonesia, it will be less than, probably be between 1% and 3%. And that's always been the case, and there's been looking at how a lot of companies have tried to target that segment over the last 15 years. We're starting to see another, I would say it's a second cycle of companies that are trying to target, as in, okay, we have a lot of innovations that has happened. A lot of more and more consumers have internet and they've started to use and got comfortable using e-commerce services. Even in Japan, back then, most of the transaction was not credit card. You go to convenience stores for cash, right? Yeah. Cash payments. Right. But now more and more people are getting used to using debit cards. And building transaction data. So is there a way where they can utilize that transaction data and they use that as a credit scoring and then issue a credit card? So there's a lot of different solutions that's been starting to be built, but it's still very early in the stage. But that's another space that a lot of the investors and a lot of the startups are also looking at, and more on the retail end and also on the SME end as well.
Okay. Hendry, do you have any ideas?
From our experience so far, as Yoshi has mentioned, there are three spaces basically. One is the supply chain financing. That's very interesting. That's some things that when supply chain financing, we are talking about typically a principal. It can be FMCG company, it can be automotive and whatever. Then typically they have the big distributor, small distributor, up until the retails. So those people at the principal level or the big distributor level, they have no problem securing financing from a bank. But from second level and below, they have a problem because bank always requiring collateral. Whereas all these data have been there because the FMCG and the principal, especially the FMCG part, they are using this to forecast the demand. So the data is already there. But the reason why the banking world do not want to do it is because in bank, typically they have a target. So if they can, let's say one of the FMCG players that we work with, they have 400 distributors and sub-distributors. So the bank only is serving the top 20. So they don't want to move to 21 and below because top 20 is the safest, like 0% default. And their target is fulfilled, they get the bonus, then that's it. Why bother, why taking risks, right? So that's the supply chain. Secondly is logistic. So this is where I think Umisawa-san's solution is going to be very interesting. Logistic in Indonesia is that very cash business in the sense that if a trucking company got the order to move, let's say Coca-Cola will pay 60 days, 90 days later, whereas they need to pay the driver right away. They need to pay for the gas for the truck right away. So they always have a working capital needs when they grow, right? And lastly is the agribusiness. So this is classic. We all know that they need financing, But it's very, very difficult so far to manage the risk because one is the willingness. I mean, the farmer, when they get the money, their eyes are green, you know. They're not paying loans. They will buy new televisions, new car, new motorcycle, or even worse, they'll marry second wife and not return the money to you. Yeah, so it's solving the willingness part is the pain.
And also collection, right?
Yeah, the collection.
Every farming.
Correct.
Yeah, farming was always difficult in other countries as well. No cash flow until harvest, and no reason to really have cash until harvest. So any fintech would be useful. But in many cases, these problems actually sound like they are more universal problems, not country-specific problems. And so there seems to be a room for Japanese fintech companies to try to expand their model into the Indonesian market. Okay, thank you. Now, I'd like to turn the question around a little bit and talk about whether Komunal's problem, the problem that Komunal is trying to address is actually relevant to Japan. And at first, when we invested in Komunal, I thought it was completely unrelated to anything in Japan. But I don't think this is the case anymore. And Okubo-san, can you elaborate a little bit about the problems of the deposits in the Japanese regional banking institutions?
And also that also plays into one of the themes or thesis we had when, from the growth fund team, we also liked investing in Komunal. So I think it's quite similar when you look at Indonesia and also Japan in that even the US, if you look at historically speaking, you have a number of banks that pop up. And of course you have the countrywide, they get, through M&As, they would get so big that they would become more of a country national bank. And then, so there's a diversification of those banks that continue to become bigger versus you will have rural banks. And in Japan, there's at least more than 20, if you open up even like a stock app and just type in Chiho Ginko, local banks, there was more than 20 that's listed. AUM is hundreds of billions of dollars, right? But the key thing that they are concerned about is, of course, with the lift of the YCC, I think the NIM expectation is also already priced into the stocks as early as last year. But all this decade, the issue has always been that there's more depositors at the rural banks that are moving their fund to more the national banks. So how do they solve that in trying to get the deposit, which is always the cheapest cost of fund? And of course, for the banks itself, from what I understand, it had been different during the negative yield curve days, but the core of the banking business is really on the lending side. So how do you lend and make money out of the lowest cost of funds? So if you're losing the deposit and depositors to other banks, you're losing your capability and strengths as a bank. So I think that's one. And then second is really on how they can use technology even further to more effectively run their organization. And I think that's where Komunal also comes in, and that they're actually solving those problems and have shown a lot of track record in Indonesia.
Okay. Yeah. So when we say rural banks, that would translate into Japanese literally as Chiho Ginko. But of course, the Japanese regional banks are full banking institutions under Japanese law. And the institutions that are closer to Japanese, to BPRs in Japan would be the Shinyo Kinko and the Shinyo Sumiai, because they have limited geographical scope and limited business scope. And those are especially likely to face the same kind of problems that our BPRs are facing in Indonesia right now. So I think Komunal is a big inspiration for the Japanese financial institutions as we enter the age of non-zero interest rate.
0.1.
And they have range.
Yeah. The interest rate in Japan, term deposits in Japan have gone up to something like 0.3% these days. Much higher than it used to be.
6.4.
Okay, so thank you very much for attending this seminar and panel discussion. Thank you very much to the panelists for taking the time to come. This concludes the seminar, and we have a networking session afterwards. Yes? Okay. So thank you very much.